We're here at the Wetsuit Outlet and Zhik International Moth World Championships, which has been a week of waiting around, but we've got the top female sailors here. We've got Hattie Rogers, Lisa Schweigert, Helena Scutt, Emily Nagel, Bella Fellows, Josie Gliddon and Franzi Mäge. So thank you all for joining us. Now first I'd just like to ask, what is your sailing background? Let's start with Hattie.
So I came through Oppies, so kind of the typical junior pathway, and then I went into 29ers, and then from there I was at uni, so I was doing some actual stuff, and then went WASPs and into the Moth. So yeah, that's me.
Lisa?
I also started in Oppies, you pronounce it, and did quite a lot of racing then, and I went up to 420s. And then I basically stopped sailing or racing for about 10 years. I studied, and then after my studies I decided to travel, and I wanted to go back to sailing, so I did an Atlantic crossing, and then in the Caribbean I found a Blade Rider, and that's where I basically started to sail on a Moth. And when I got back home I bought a boat.
Helena?
I didn't do a regatta until I was 15 years old, so I didn't do the Optimist thing. But then I started in lasers, and then 29ers as a crew, and then college sailing in the US is a big thing. So I did that for 4 years, and at the same time I was sailing the 49er FX when that was a new Olympic class. So I went to the Rio Olympics in the 49er FX with Paris Henkin. And then after that I switched to the NACRA 17 that had just become foiling. So that was my first foiling experience. And then towards the end of that NACRA campaign, I got a foiling Moth, and then that has been the perfect antidote to stopping full-time sailing.
And how about you, Emily?
So I started out in Opties and Fevers when I was younger, then ended up in the world of team racing and match racing through kind of high school and university. And then in the run-up to the 2017 America's Cup, I was part of the Bermuda Youth AC team, so that's kind of how my addiction to foiling started, and kind of first got into the Moth then. Took a bit of a break from it while I did some big boat stuff, going offshore and that sort of thing, and missed the world of foiling too much, so came back to the Moth and have race run for the past few years.
And Bella?
I started out in toppers and then 29ers, so I've raced against Hattie for quite a long time now. Then I campaigned the 49er FX, and then after that I got a WASP, and then only just moved into the Moth in November, and that's me.
And Josie?
So my sailing career is longer than Hattie's been alive. But I started in Oppies as well, so good grounding, 420s, 470s, and then I've raced pretty much every one design keelboat there can be, so SB20s, Melders 24s, done the Fastnet a couple of times, done a few other offshores. Foiling wasn't a thing when I was sort of some of these girls' ages. And so, but I so wanted to foil. The first time I saw Adam May pick up a bottle off the dock at the boat show, I was hooked. And then it's quite a big investment, so I saved an awful lot. And then 5 years ago, I jumped into the Moth and haven't looked back since, really.
And Franzi?
I started at the Optimist, and after I did the 420 and then the Olympic 470. But at some point, my Helm, Helena, and I decided to stop the 420. And at that time, my brother, Max, and my dad, Carlo, were sailing the Moth. And so it was not a hard decision to make to hop on the Moth and try foiling. And yeah, since then, I was hooked. And that was in 2017, just before the Garda Worlds. And yeah, since then, I'm sailing the Moth.
Now, the first time out in a Moth, I think you have that anticipation, a bit of trepidation before you go out in it, because you've all seen them flying around. What was it like that first time you got up and foiling? Let's start with Bella.
Yeah, obviously it's a bit nerve-wracking, but no, it's just such a great feeling when you first get on the foils. Like, you just feel weightless, like you're flying. Yeah, well, you are flying. Yeah, it's just such a unique feeling, and yeah, I love it.
And Lisa, you'd gone Atlantic cruising, and so you can't have much different types of sailing than Atlantic cruise to out in the Moth.
Yeah, true. And I remember when I was foiling around in Antigua and Falmouth Harbour, it was like just this like really big boats out on the moorings or inside of the marina, and then me like trying to foil around in between the moorings, and then reefs and then turtles, and I was like, yeah, it was good fun, but not the easiest place to start to try and get on the foils and stay alive. But it was like just the moment when the boat lifts up and it's all of a sudden like this kind of quiet, and it accelerates and you just like and then yeah, in the beginning like me, I just went in a straight line, and then like you pitch pole or something happens, and then you get the boat back up and you again go in a straight line, just like wah! And it took me a while to figure out how to jibe, and then I was really lucky that another like French moth sailor, he used to be the class president of the French moth class, he arrived and he hopped on the boat and he basically showed me how to do it, and I was like, okay, that makes sense.
That actually brings me on to a point where when people are coming into the Moth class, doing it on your own is extremely difficult. So are you around for people who might be inquisitive about the class? Let's go with Helena on this. Say you've got someone out in the USA is really interested in the Moth class. Are you there to help them out?
Yeah, of course. And there are lots of other moth sailors that are as well. I think the biggest thing or the best thing you can do if you're trying to get into the moth class is to sail around other people. And then also people are more than happy to answer your questions about what gear to get based on your size and where you sail and things like that, your budget. So definitely don't hesitate to ask questions, and people are more than happy to share their knowledge and their journey. So it's definitely just a question of showing up and being there and asking any questions.
And Franzi, when you came into the class, did you have any assistance apart from the people who were sailing around you? And how did you find that time?
What I love about moth sailing is that the community is great. Like Helena said, everyone helps you, and if you ask questions, there's always someone to help you. And yeah, that's what I really love about the class.
Yeah. And Hattie, you've taken the route from the Wasp class, so that whole foiling side of things you've already got used to that. How did you find the step over to the International Moth?
Yeah, so I transitioned in November, but I'm still sailing the Wasp kind of alongside just to keep the race time up. But I think it was just interesting coming from the Wasp because the Wasp is quite like a safe boat and it doesn't have any like stays or anything. So I thought that was a good route in, and I couldn't afford a Moth. Still can't really afford a Moth, to be honest. But I think that was quite good for me, and I think hopefully we'll see some more people do it. And Bella as well. She's just come over from the Wasp as well. Yeah, we've been racing each other for a while, haven't we? So yeah, I mean, I've loved the Wasp so far, and the Moth, and it's cool to be doing both at the same time.
And Bella, how have you found that transition?
Yeah, I mean, the Wasp is great, and it's like a little go-kart. Just you zip around, and then jumping into the Moth, it was just like a bit more kind of finessed. Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe it. But it's like, yeah, it is a bit of a step up in terms of the speed. Is just like another level. And also, yeah, when you're hooning downwind and you see those shrouds in front of you, and you're just like, oof, got to make sure I hike hard so I don't hit them. But yeah.
I think I'm writing Josie and Emily. You're probably the ones who've sailed the Moth for the longest. Is that probably correct? Definitely Josie. So, Josie, what is it that keeps bringing you back?
Well, I think I might set you right. I think Emily had her first Moth way before me, but then she had a bit of time out, didn't you? So, but I will answer your question. I think probably everyone you talk to in the dinghy park. I'm not sure what other boat I would sail. And it is the community, you know, it keeps on bringing you back. And I mean, there's other people who've been sailing the Moth for 20 years, you know, and they're still doing it and they're still loving it. And I think partly is because in 5 years' time, the boats won't be the same. They're not the same as they were 5 years ago. So you're continuing to evolve, you know, and I think that's probably why I love sailing, because you just continue to evolve and you continue to learn. And there's just so much to learn. And if you have that mindset, you know, it's just fantastic. You know, you can't stand still. So that probably was what keeps me here.
Well, now that I understand that Emily's been sailing them the longest, what is it that keeps bringing you back to the class?
I think for me, I've kind of just always been really curious about the Moth. I mean, the first time I saw one was in Weymouth when I came over for the Optimist British Nationals, like, I don't know, 2006, I want to say. And even that, like, seeing this boat flying above the water, was like, I'm going to do that one day. I remember my dad being like, yeah, right, like, if you ever get, like, to the point where you could sail one of those, I'll buy a boat for you. But he didn't. Still doesn't understand sailing. But then when I saw them in Bermuda before the America's Cup, I was like, yeah, it's time to figure out how do I get one of those, because they're just so cool. And so I did get a Blade Rider back in 2016 for, I split it with a friend and it was $5,000 US. It had heaps of holes in it. The sail didn't really look much like a sail, but it got me foiling, and that experience just was magic from the start. And I really enjoyed the challenges of trying to figure it out. Like, I remember my first jibe and being so excited that I fist pumped the air and then crashed. And it was just, I really enjoyed that learning curve, and then took a few years out of it, focusing on other things. But coming back into it, it was just the level of the performance and getting to race and learn with some of the best sailors in the world is just an incredible experience. Like, I feel like every time I go on the water, whether it's for an event or for just training, you're just constantly learning heaps, which just is really engaging.
One of the things you've just mentioned there, you started in a Blade Rider and you've gone through a Rocket and I think now an Exocet. There's a huge range of options available to people coming into the Moth class. What are you currently using, and what would you recommend to people coming into the class as their first boat to get, which will get them up, foiling and sailing around a course as quickly as possible? Let's start with Lisa on this.
Several questions, right? Like, maybe first, like, I'm sailing a Rocket. I'm pretty happy with that boat. I wouldn't recommend it as a starting boat because it needs some love, and like, I'm constantly learning how to get it going and fix things. And I would recommend, like, I think maybe a Mach 2 is the best boat to start with. And if you, like, well, depending on the budget, I mean, if you have a bigger budget, you could also, of course, go for an Exocet, which is really, like, reliable and solid boat. But yeah, it's, I mean, just to get started with, I think you don't need the most expensive and, like, fastest boat. You just need to figure out how the foiling thing works, and then once you are hooked and you really like what it's all about, then you can go for an upgrade, let's say.
And Franzi, what are you using at the moment? And how did you find it initially?
I'm using a Mach 2.6, and yeah, I feel like it's the right boat for me. And I've also started on a Mach 2, but in my opinion, if you want to get into the Moth, just get yourself a solid platform, either a Mach 2 or an Exocet. We can help you with, like, choosing the right boat. And I must say, there are, like, solid boats at the moment for, I mean, no, it's not cheap, but there are good boats at a lower price because the market is quite good at the moment. And then just make sure to work on the maneuvers and like foiling jibes and tacks. And afterwards you can, for example, upgrade after a year when you're like good on the maneuvers. Then it's time to upgrade. Or what do you think about it, Josie?
Yeah, I think totally agree. I think, everybody has a budget and it doesn't really matter what your budget is. Maybe push it a little bit because you'll always want more. But I think if you want something enough, you'll make it work. And there's some super cheap boats out there. And if you can do a bit of carbon work, you can upgrade. I know Lisa's laughing because I see her every day. She's like, "Can I borrow your grinder again, Josie?" It's like, "Sure." What are you fixing this time? But I bought a Mach 2 first off, and I did quite a bit of boat work on it to upgrade it in the garage. My husband also sells the Moth, but I think I taught him a little bit about laminate, and then he teaches me a bit about engineering, and that was kind of quite fun. Date night's always fun in the Gliddon garage. You go and find what you can afford, because like everyone here, is the first time you get up foiling and the first time you foil jibe, there's nothing like it. Nothing like it at all.
And post a World Championship must be a pretty good time to get hold of second-hand boats. So Bella and Hattie, where you've got friends in the Wasp class who must be thinking, let's have a go in the Moths. Do you think some of them, you could advise them as to what to get and where?
Yeah, kind of. I think I'm still kind of getting my own head around all the kit. It's quite easy to get carried away and be like, oh, I need this sail or whatever, but actually it's just time on the water, I think, more than anything. But yeah, I'm definitely trying to persuade a couple of my Wasp friends to jump in and might just like give them a go in my boat so that they can get the buzz for it, because I think once you get that buzz, it's really hard to not just want to jump in it and get going. I don't know what you think, Hattie.
I think there's a lot of people coming through the Wasp at the moment. We've got quite a lot of boats entered always for the UK Nationals, so the biggest domestic fleet in the world, which is super cool. So I think we could see a lot of people make the step up from the Wasp to the Moth. I guess it's just, as you say, like just being on a solid package, and you don't need the best kit. And I think at the top of the Moth class, there's a lot of people that have like multiple foils and multiple sails and like lots of bits of equipment. But as Bella said, if you can just have one sail and a set of foils to go sailing on and just get the maneuvers locked down, then that's a good way to start. That's definitely what I did in Palma. So then I came here and got to know everyone.
Now, you've got the separate Women's World Championship title, and often at Nationals as well. Which do you think's more important, though, winning that or finishing as high up as possible in the championship table? I can see Emily is itching to answer this one.
At the end of the day, I think, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think all of us are pretty keen to do as well as we possibly can, beat as many of the boys as we can, ultimately win if we can. And if you win the women's trophy, then that's great. But I want to see everyone sat here do as well as we possibly can, all make it into Gold Fleet, etc. And whoever wins the women's trophy, happy for them, but take out as many of the boys as we can in the process.
And Helena, I think you're leading the female ranking at the moment after this mighty 2 races that we've had after 5.5 days of racing. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I'm totally with Emily here. I'm here to see all of these fantastic sailors do as well as they possibly can, and I'm here to race against everybody. So it's an awesome challenge, and I love it. I think it's an awesome thing about the Moth class. I love racing with everyone and just want to do as well as I can and put my best performance forward.
Yeah, I'm pretty opinionated on this as well, as all these girls know. I'm all for equality and being equitable in our sport, and this class actually just proves that you can be all sorts of shapes and sizes, all ages and all different diversities, and still be on the same start line. And it goes back to being evolution and evolving as a sailor and being the best sailor as you possibly can be. And on the water, a sailor is a sailor. It doesn't matter what gender they are or anything else to do with diversity. That's where we should focus, not discuss it really.
Brilliant. And is there anything that the class can do, be it changes with the rules, that can make it as equal as possible? Lisa?
Changes of the rules, I don't know. I mean, I think it's not unequal. I think it's maybe just... And I was like asking myself the question over and over again, why just to get into the class is so much harder for women than for men, or how, like, why we're not...
Can I add to that? I like statistics. But actually this class is actually doing pretty well from a statistic perspective. So all the classes that I've sailed in, typically there's about 6% females, and typically there's about 1 or 2% of those females helming. So we're actually bucking the trend here, believe it or not. And it's just our sport. When you're not in those sort of quoted classes. But I think actually the rules are so diverse in the fact that you can have any size sail, you can have any sort of boat, you can have any sort of foil. It's actually pretty levelling. And it comes back to actually picking the right kit, working pretty hard, going to do your manoeuvres. We can all get better. So I think actually the class doesn't need to change anything. And, like all of us here saying, come and have a go, come and talk to us, come and challenge us, because we all want to be challenged, because we all want to be the best sailors we possibly can be. So kind of come and join us, really.
That leads me on to the final thing I'd like to ask each of you in turn, and we'll start with Franzi on this, is people who are thinking about joining the class, what would you say to them, and how would you persuade them to make that jump, get in the boat, get foiling?
They should do it. Like, there's no question. I mean, there's no better feeling than foiling around. Just get them off. But yeah, I think one barrier is that it's maybe, or female barrier might be maybe that it's too technical and too expensive. But as we said, there are good boats for a cheap price, and if there are any questions, we can organize like training camps where they just hop on and they can try it. And I think that's one way to get into the class. Just ask us, try it, and then we make sure you get the best kit.
Okay. We'll go to the other side now with Hattie, please, for that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Em and I and some of the Brits were thinking about organising a foiling camp at the end of the summer. Helena's done a really good job in the States, down in San Diego, was it? And that's resulted in quite a few people coming into class, and both wasps and moths. So it'd be super cool to do that here. And as you guys were saying earlier, when you get the feeling of flying and tacking and jibing, it's a really steep learning curve, and it's just super cool. So I think that could definitely help people, bring more people into class. But as Josie was saying earlier, if you really want to do something, then you will do anything to make it happen. And for me, I didn't have the money, but I found sponsors. It took about 2 months and plenty of emails and calls to sort that out. So you just got to really put a lot of effort into making it work and making it happen.
Okay, and Lisa?
Don't hesitate and contact us and ask, and maybe it's all about that first feeling when you have your first go on a moth, and that's maybe sometimes not that easy if you don't have friends or people around who you already foiling. So yeah, maybe it's about like just reach out, get a go on a boat, come to a camp, and then yeah, like Hattie said, once you had that feeling, you kind of you will make it happen or work.
And Josie, you've described how people within the class will always help. Is that going to continue to be the case?
Yeah, I think it's everyone does this for fun, right? And so it's people's holidays, and obviously it's incredibly tough, but it's an amazing community. It's so easy to get in contact with anyone around the world, and there are actually a lot of females, if you wanted to reach out to a female, but realistically it doesn't really matter whether you're female or male. Everybody is incredibly helpful. There's 100 and however many of us here, but there's another couple of hundred mothies out there doing other stuff, and all of them I'm sure will be more than happy to help.
And Helena, we've heard that you've run the moth camps before. Is that going to continue?
So I'll tell you a bit about the one that I did. It was in San Diego last April, and we had 17 women who had never foiled before. They all had a sailing background, and everyone got foiling that weekend. We had 7 or 8 moths, and it was probably the highlight of my year. It was so wonderful to see people buzzing about foiling for the first time, and the atmosphere was incredibly supportive, encouraging. We also covered the things that you don't really necessarily know unless someone tells you. So like, how do you orient your boat to the wind when you're rigging it, and the foils and everything? How do you carry your boat into the water? Just stuff like that. We went over rigging and all sorts of topics. And it'll be a bit tough for me to do one for the next 15 months or so, but after that I definitely want to organize some more. And I would also like to say that for any of the guy sailors in the Moth fleet watching, you can organize a clinic to get more people into the fleet too. It's not just on us, and I know there's a lot of boats for sale, and there's a lot of people that would probably love to buy your boat if they had a chance to sail it. So I challenge the sailors to open some doors.
And Bella?
A lot of it's been covered already, but I think sometimes it comes down to confidence, and I feel like sometimes the boys are able to just be like, yeah, I'm doing this. And I think if you can just get over those initial doubts of whether you're capable of doing it or not, then there's literally nothing stopping you, and hopefully we'll get loads more girls in the fleet to compete against.
Can I add something to that?
Of course.
I've noticed that the guy sailors that I've grown up with are given a lot of opportunities to sail X and Y boat, whatever. And they're also encouraged to just like go be brave. And like, if you break stuff, it means you were pushing it and like trying hard. And for the girls, I've seen the girls be told to like be careful and like be perfect and like all that kind of stuff. And so I just tell myself like, be brave, not perfect. Like, I'm here to push myself and it's sometimes those messages that I was talking about, sometimes they're explicit, sometimes they're not. But I'm very conscious of basically just the messages that I would send to young sailors that I see in the boat park.
I'd completely echo what you both have just said. It's so obvious when you see it. So be brave.
Yeah. The number of people when I'm rigging my Moth and they're like, oh, are you going to go sail? It looks kind of windy. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go sail. Thanks.
Emily, I'm 100% sure you've got something to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've really been affected by that for as long as I can remember. I've always been one of the more nervous people in the breeze, and I've essentially trying to rewire my brain to not be so nervous or freaked out whenever the breeze gets up. And it's from exactly that of, I've always been told to be careful and don't break stuff, but the boys will go out and send it. And I really noticed that when my partner has sailed a Moth as well, and he has a completely different attitude towards it than I do. So there is a lot of that of just be confident, be brave, just send it and have fun. And it really doesn't matter how you do. Like, it is just about experiencing it and learning it. So yeah, as Hattie mentioned, we're super keen to host a women's clinic here in the UK. So if you are watching this and it's something you'd be interested in, please do get in touch with myself, Hattie, Josie, Bella, and if you're in a different country, talk to someone from your country is probably easier. And probably end of summer. We haven't figured out dates yet, but please do get in touch if you're interested. And for any of the guys out there that are looking to sell boats, probably also get in touch, because if you can have your boat down here and see it out on the water, someone might be interested. So everyone try and support getting more people into the class, because it's really not as scary as anyone thinks.
I think I forgot to mention about the clinic that I did. 5 women bought moths and 1 or 2 bought wasps out of 17. So it's a pretty great way to grow the fleet.
So it sounds like be confident, take the step, get in the moth, send it, break stuff, and have a huge amount of fun.
Emphasis on send it.
I gotta say thank you all so much for your time. Fantastic insight into your own sailing, and hopefully we'll persuade many more sailors into the moth class.
Thanks.